Hello, lovely yogis. In today's mini masterclass, we are going to be looking at Ardho Mukha Svanasana. In other words, downward facing dog. This might be one of the most famous yoga poses out there. When people think of yoga, they probably think of this triangular position with our hips in the air, our hands on the ground, feet on the ground. I'm going to be talking us through this pose. It's traditionally a resting pose, but especially when you're a beginner, it doesn't really feel that way. Now that I'm familiar with yoga, I love downward facing dog. It's an amazing pose and it just really realigns my body. I can take little adjustments. I just love checking in with myself when I'm in that pose. And I don't feel that it's super intense anymore. I think when I started, I probably did. It's a really great pose, and I want you to feel really confident when you go into this pose. In any yoga practice, you're probably going to come across it. So, in order to start, a really nice way to start is to come into our tabletop foundation. So, our hands are directly underneath our shoulders, and our knees are directly underneath our hips. Tops of our feet are pressing into the mat. So this is a really great way to come into the pose, especially if you're just starting out. And then we can walk our hands about a hand width or two forwards. Really spread through the fingers here. And we want to imagine that we're kind of pointing our index finger forward, pressing into the knuckles. So on the palm of your hands, really pressing down through the knuckles on your hands. Once we're here, we'll tuck under our toes and begin to lift our knees to a hover off the mat. And then see if we can send our hips a little higher. Sending our hips over the toes, and you might just like to walk your toes a little bit further forward or just shuffle your position as is needed. That's what's wonderful about this pose, is that you can really shuffle your position around and really have a play around with it to feel good for your body. So the idea is that you want your hips to be nice and high and over your heels. And when you send your hips high, you can kind of suck your belly button in towards your spine. And imagine that you're pointing your tailbone up towards the sky. Now, you might notice that my knees are bent, and perhaps in photographs or other yoga classes, you've seen perfectly straight legs with your heels touching the mat. And honestly, that is not the aim of this pose. This pose is actually more of a arm and shoulder strengthener. So you really want to be putting our awareness to that part of the body, really, traditionally anyway. So we're really reaching through the arms and through the shoulders. And we want to make sure that our head is heavy. Coming back to the navel then, making sure that your belly button is being drawn in towards your spine, and then your tailbone is nice and high. We can have a lovely bend in the knees to make sure that we're really pointing our tailbone up. And we're really stretching through the posterior chain of our body. So that's the kind of backs of the legs and the lower back area. Because if you're trying to get these straight legs and it's not available for your body to then point your tailbone up, you kind of get this weird rounding in the spine, and that's just not going to be beneficial for you. So it's far better to do away with any kind of ideals you have through looking at books and photos and very flexible people, and just take a nice generous bend in your knees. Just go for it, and that will be doing wonders for your body. That will be doing much more for your body than having straight legs and your heels touching the mat. So with your heels then, once you're in the pose, you can actually play around with a little bit of movement, pressing your heels down towards the mat, pedaling the feet, as it's often referred to. Just kind of stretch out the backs of the legs. It just feels really nice, and it does kind of wake up the legs, which is nice. But obviously, as I mentioned, the pose is kind of more focused in the upper body and arm strength. So this is why this pose can get quite tiring quite quickly. But just stick with it, because over time you will find that it becomes easier, and you hopefully, like me, start to really enjoy this pose. And you can keep your feet close together, you can keep your feet nice and wide, and it's just a great pose to get into so many other poses as well. It's like a really lovely transition pose. Make sure your head is heavy. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that, but you can do that by just nodding your head from side to side, and your gaze should be kind of looking at your knees, or some people say navel, so your belly button. It just really depends on your own body, so you really have to feel into it. That's what's so beautiful about yoga, is that you find your own expression of all of these poses. You can really get into lots of different poses from here. Come into your three-legged dog, open up the hip, find wild thing, step it forward, finding a low lunge, high lunge. Come into a version of Sun Salutations. This is a pose that is traditionally in our Sun Salutation sequence. In fact, I've never come across a Sun Salutation sequence that doesn't contain a downward facing dog. It's just a really lovely pose. But options, if you're feeling tired in a class and you're in downward facing dog, you can come into a child's pose. So simply lower onto your knees and set your hips back over your heels, and you can kind of extend your arms out nice and long. Maybe create a pillow with your hands. You can bring your hands to your sides. This is a very traditional balasana or child's pose, but this definitely feels like more of a resting pose. And I will do a mini masterclass on child's pose as well. So there we have it. I'll just come into downward dog one more time. Maybe you can do it with me. Have a little play around with your body. And then we'll lower onto our knees, shift onto our seat. So there you have it. Ardho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Let me know how you found that. Was it useful to hear a little bit more depth about the pose and some options and things like that? Let me know in the comments what you think, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.